Hi, and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's book-to-show comparison for the Expanse Season 3, Episode 11, Fallen World. This video is a part of a series of videos where I compare the Expanse TV show to its source material, pointing out the differences and giving my opinion on how well these adaptations work. So I have to start with a spoiler warning for the Expanse up to the end of Season 3. If you haven't seen up to this point, you will not want to watch this video, otherwise some things will be spoiled for you. However, if you have seen all of Season 3 but not read the novels, not to worry, this video will not contain spoilers from the novels beyond Season 3, so you are safe from future spoilers. So our episode begins in the alien station where Holden has collapsed, and Draper goes to him and determines he's still alive but in danger, so decides they need to get him back to her ship. But the other Martian Marines are less concerned about his well-being, as Private Trep blames him for the death of their lieutenant. Draper orders them to leave and has the others prepared to do so. She notices the bullets frozen in midair in a purple haze and then warns her team to stop. She then orders Trep to fire a round up into the air and not hit anything. He does, and the round is stopped by the purple haze. Draper from that determines that the speed limit has changed and they now know what the new speed limit is, and tells the others not to go above it. The others thank her for knowing that, otherwise they would have been stuck. But Draper just says that they should get Holden and get out of there. So in the novels, as I mentioned in my previous video, Draper wasn't there, so we didn't get a scene like this, and further, Holden wasn't rendered unconscious by touching the alien device, and he actually has a little conversation about his experience with Miller afterwards, before the Martians come in and interrupt and then haul him away. We didn't get a scene like this of the Martians figuring out about the new speed limit. I think it's assumed they were in communication with their ship that told them about it. Of course, the way they do it here is more interesting as it has more character, so I'm going to give this a +1. So then we go to Naomi on her skiff, recovering from the incident. She's a little shook up by this, but she was strapped in when it happened, so it was mostly okay. She looks and sees all the other ships trapped by the purple haze. She tries to turn on her engines, but the desired effect does not work, as the engines just explode and fire starts to build in 0G. So she rushes to get her suit on and then opens the outer door to put out the fire. She then throws a wrench to make sure it's safe and then proceeds to jump out into space. So in the novels, Naomi never left Rosnate, so this scene obviously didn't happen so much as so there's not much to say about it. However, in the novels, we first follow Clarissa after the aftermath of the speed limit changing, and then we follow Anna. It's a bit more confusing on what happens. So I like that we first go to Naomi. We actually see what happened when someone tries to move a ship after it's been caught. It doesn't turn out so well. Also, it works for what they established in the show, and it shows how Naomi gets back to the Rosnate, so I'm going to give this a +2. We then see Draper and Trep on the Martian ship, putting Holden in the medical chair that reads that he's flatlining, so Draper manages to stabilize him. Draper then orders Trep to keep an eye on him. Later, Trep will suggest that perhaps it's best if Holden doesn't wake up, because he has to face the consequences for what he did to the lieutenant and for everyone else on the Susan. Draper is confused by this, as clearly Holden didn't do anything and that it was the station. Trep then complains that Draper doesn't seem at all concerned about what happened to their lieutenant, but is very concerned about Holden. Draper then points out that she shot at Holden and she was ready to put him down. So Trep hands her his gun and suggests that she do it. Draper takes the gun and puts it away, saying that they need to talk to Holden to find out what he knows. Draper then goes to the pilot deck to talk to Private Oshie, who explains what happened to all the ships when the speed limit changed. She also explains that the new speed limit would take 7 months to get back to the opening of the ring in order to get out of the ring. Draper explains that the station must have been acting in defense after the lieutenant threw the grenade, but Oshie argues that that isn't self-defense, it was a slaughter. Oshie then defends Trep, saying that he's not wrong about Holden, but Draper insists that Holden isn't a killer and he must know something, and when he wakes up, they'll talk to him. So in the novels, the Martian drag Holden out of the station, which was a longer journey, as in the novels they were much deeper into the station. And Holden starts to run out of air, and the Martians simply ignore him until he actually does run out of air once they're back on the ship, when the Martian carrying him finally opens his helmet to let him breathe the air on the ship. The lieutenant asks the man if there's something wrong with the prisoner, and he explains that the prisoner ran out of air, and that seems to be that. Later, Holden insists that he talk to his ship to know if his crew is okay, and everyone there just ignores him until the lieutenant finally orders one of the men to silence the prisoner. Holden then expects a blow, but instead the Martian simply tells Holden there's nothing he can do for his crew right now, and he just needs to be quiet, so Holden complies. So in the novels, I think the Martians are a bit more truer to character, all business and not worrying about events that they can't control, and are simply following orders like good Marines. Where the Marines in the show seems a lot less disciplined and suggest killing a prisoner without orders, and are being completely obtuse about blaming Holden for killing all these people. I did like Draper's added presence in the show, but the Marines' absurd behavior was a bit out of character and honestly a bit annoying as well. So I'm going to give this a -3. So next we go to the Behemoth, where Drummer and Ashford are trapped by a piece of farming equipment, where Ashford is at one end of the farming equipment and Drummer is at the other. So I decided to go ahead and cover pretty much all of these scenes at once, since they all really tell one story. So anyway, they try to unlock the mag locks, so the farming equipment can just float upwards, setting them free, but the locks are jammed and it won't budge. Drummer tries to start the engine, but Ashford points out that won't work, as forward kills him and backward kills Drummer. So Drummer tells Ashford that he was right, they do have a problem that they need to work out. Later, they see a hand terminal floating nearby, so Drummer suggests Ashford use the equipment's mech arm to grab it, but Ashford complains that he can't see it from where he is, so Drummer guides him to it. And after several attempts, they manage to grab it by working together, and Ashford celebrates by saying Belter ingenuity at its finest. He then prepares to guide it to Drummer so she can grab it and call for help, but the mech shorts out and it crushes and destroys the hand terminal. Later, Ashford is singing a song which annoys Drummer, but he explains that he sang this song to his daughter, so it calms him to sing it when he's in situations like this. Drummer then asks what was the worst situation he's ever been in, and he talks about a gun run where he got stranded because he blew the engines going too fast because he was eager to get back to a girl. He then asks Drummer the same question, and she replies a bar where the bartender had a heavy hand and she had a heavy heart. He finds this amusing. Drummer then asks whose idea it was to create the OPA uniforms, and Ashford says that it was his idea, and Drummer replies that she doesn't want to dress in the clothes of her enemy, but Ashford retorts that when victims become the victors, they need to show the others they are worthy and united, and they all need to come together as belters. This seems to inspire Drummer, who starts singing the same song Ashford was singing earlier, and he joins in and they sing together. So in the novels, we got absolutely no equivalent to these scenes whatsoever. We follow Bull, who wakes up in the med bay, who apparently was in the security office watching reports of the time of the incident. He wakes up in the med bay and asks to see Sam, who arrives just in time as the doctor explains to him that he's paralyzed from the chest down and suggests he go into a medical coma so that they can eventually find a way to repair the damage once they're under thrust. Bull refuses, saying that they're in a crisis and that he needs to be involved. Sam cries and begs him to take the doctor's advice, but Bull insists doing his duty in this critical situation is more important than his life. So the doctor reluctantly agrees to let him remain awake, and Bull proceeds to coordinate the relief effort from his bed in the medbay. So a couple of things here. So first off, in the novels, the Behemoth was said to be going slower than most ships when the new speed limit hit, and thus suffered less damage and less casualties. But even so, Bull got paralyzed just from sitting in his office. Based on how this event was described in the novels, there's no way anyone standing right next to a giant piece of farming equipment like that would have survived. Secondly, Ashford and Drummer would have had to be standing in very specific places for one to be caught at one end and the other to be caught at the other. Plus, it would have rolled, only one way, so it doesn't really make sense for them both to get stuck. So the situation to turn out the way it did, in practical terms, is impossible. So the whole sequence comes off as incredibly contrived, a contrived way to invent a way for Drummer and Ashford to be stuck together, and they would have to work together to try to get out, and only to discover the only way out is for one of them to sacrifice themselves. It makes no logical sense, so I'm going to give this a -5. Plus, these scenes, while somewhat character building, were mostly boring and dragged on for far too long, so I'm going to give this another -5. Also, the scenario in the novels of Bull being paralyzed but refusing treatment because he knew the captain was an idiot, and if he left the captain alone it would cause the doom of everyone, was far more interesting, so I'm going to give this another -5. So we then go over to the Thomas Prince, where we see Clarissa waking up after the disaster. She has a broken arm and notices blood floating all around her. She then sees that Tilly is hanging upside down from the ceiling, where she is attached to it by a pipe that's protruding from her chest. Clarissa calmly walks by her and proceeds down the corridor. So in the novels, Clarissa was asleep at the time of the incident. It described her dreaming and feeling that she had when the incident occurred. After she woke up, she found that crews had already started sealing dead bodies to the walls to try to clear the corridors. She comes across another officer who, once learning that she's an electrician, orders her to go to environmental control to help in repairs. Once there, she finds a severely injured man that orders her to repair a system that she has no idea how to repair, but she doesn't argue and proceeds to just do it. And the man says that he'll send others to help her if he can find them, and Clarissa says that would be good. So in the novels, it's said that the Thomas Prince, while going faster than the Behemoth, wasn't going quite the speed of the old speed limit, but it's speculated that any ship that was going close to the old speed limit, everyone on board was killed, as no one could communicate with those ships. But even at the speed that the Thomas Prince was going, it is said anyone who wasn't in a crash house at the time of the incident was instantly killed, that only people in crash houses at the time of the incident survived. Therefore, in this scenario, Clarissa would be dead. She was wandering the corridor freely, not holding on to anything. In the previous episode, we saw her fly up and hit the ceiling, and that crash would have killed her instantly. Now, one could make the argument that maybe in the show the Thomas Prince wasn't going as fast as it was in the novels. Even so, even ships going slow, Clarissa would have suffered far more injuries than she did. Plus, the novel scenario with her wasn't only more plausible, but is also more interesting. So I'm going to give this a -3. So then we see Anna slowly come out of her quarters as she looks confused and is short of breath and looks to be in pain. She walks over to an emergency med kit on the wall, opens it, and injects herself with something, and she seems to feel better after that. She then proceeds down the corridor and comes across a bunch of dead bodies just floating there. There's also a lot of blood floating around, and a droplet of it catches her and smears on her cheek. She then sees a couple of people helping others, people who are injured, and taking them somewhere, so Anna follows them to come across an emergency medical center. One of the medics there asks if she's injured, to which she replies she isn't, as she was strapped in and sleeping at the time of the incident, so he tells her to go back to her quarters and stay there for the time being. She refuses, saying that she's a trained nurse and can help, so the medic tells her to go and look for people with broken limbs and bring them here. Anna asks what about the people here, saying they can easily be healed with sutures and other easy fixes. The medic then asks her if this is her first time in 0G, to which she replies it is, so he tells her that in 0G, blood can't drain, and any internal bleeding is a death sentence. So in the novels, Anna wasn't sleeping at the time of the incident. She was in her room strapped into a crash couch, hence why she survived, but she was awake and reading at the time. And because of this, because she was reading and holding on to something, she dislocated both of her shoulders at the time of the incident, and seconds later, they were both put back into place. But both her shoulders and arms were in extreme pain, and when she left her room, she found a single dead body floating outside, which frightened her. She then heard someone calling for help and found the man she recognized as a famous poet severely injured, crying for help. She went to go get help, but found Tilly instead, who was in better condition than her. And after seeing how injured Anna was, Tilly injected her with some painkillers that took away all the pain, but at the same time made her extremely high. Tilly mentioned she got it from an emergency kit in her room, and Anna admits that she didn't even think to look for one. Anna keeps insisting they need to go find help for the poet, so Tilly takes her to look for help. They come across a security office where the CO is giving orders to his subordinates to look for survivors and clear the corridors of the dead. After the subordinates leave, Anna tells him about the poet, so the officer pushes some buttons on his terminal and tells her that he's in the queue for the relief teams. So both scenes work for their respective mediums, and it is interesting to note that the show seemed to have given Anna's injury to Clarissa instead, and made Anna, not Clarissa, the one who was asleep at the time, which is fine. Also in the novels, there wasn't any dialogue about how blood doesn't drain in 0G, which does kind of make sense, as everyone on board should be aware of this, but it was nice to thoroughly explain this to the viewer, this very important fact, which I don't think was stressed enough in the books, and I think the show, having all the dead bodies floating in the corridor and the shock on Anna's face when she came across this horror, perfectly portrayed how horrific this scene was described in the novels, but in a guttural visual way that's a lot more impactful, so I'm going to give this a +3. Later, we see Anna in the corridors helping others to get to the med bay when she comes across Clarissa crouched in the corner. She recognizes her and goes to her and asks if she's okay, but she reports that she thinks she broke her arm, so Anna injects her with some painkillers and helps her get to the med bay. There, a medic reports that she has a broken arm and gives her a medical sleeve that heals it. Clarissa asks her what happened, and Anna explains about how the speed limit got changed and all the ships are now trapped, floating helplessly towards the center. Anna must have heard this from some of the others during the time she was helping people. Clarissa clearly realizes that the Rosinante must be trapped as well, and sees this as her opportunity. Anna then gets a call from Tilly, who's incoherent and obviously in trouble, so Anna rushes off to find her, which gives Clarissa a ticking clock, as it's only a matter of time that Anna discovers who she is and what she did. So in the novels, when Anna and Tilly are at the security office, Tilly asks the security officer what happened, and he tells them about the slow zone changing, so clearly they didn't know. We don't know how Clarissa found out. Surely it was while she was working on repairs. However, Clarissa didn't get the idea to go to the Rosinante until while she was working, they had to pry a dead body out of a hatch they needed to get to, and the dead body was of a lieutenant commander with much higher clearance than her, so she stole his security card in order to gain access to the mech so she could leave the ship and go after Holden. But this way is fine. It works for the dynamic that the show established, so I'm going to give this a 0. So then we see Anna find Tilly hanging from the ceiling by a pipe protruding from her chest, and she immediately calls for help, and they reply that they'll get there as soon as they can, but it's implied that that won't be soon. Anna holds Tilly's hands and tries to comfort her, but Tilly tells Anna it's her fault because she never should have tried to help someone. At Anna's confused expression, Tilly explains that Clarissa tried to kill her, and then clarifies that Clarissa is also Melba. Anna continues to comfort her, telling her that she's going to be okay. Tilly tells Anna she's really good at this, and then Tilly dies. Anna cries as she holds her dying friend in her arms. So in the novels, Tilly does not die. She's alive and well to the very end. And regarding Clarissa, in the novels, when Tilly and Anna are at the security office, Anna spots a wanted poster of Julie Mao, and in her drug-induced state suggests perhaps she was responsible for the incident. But when Tilly sees it, she instantly recognizes that it's not Julie, it's Clarissa. But she finds that equally implausible, as Clarissa is on Luna with her family, wouldn't be out here. But then Anna recognizes her as the angry girl that she saw in the mess hall, and then all the pieces start to fit together, as that's why she was so angry and upset, because she was the one responsible for destroying the Sun Un. She tells this to the security officer, and he does a search on the security system, and the system recognizes the image as an electrician named Melba Coe and reports on where she is. And then asks the security officer to detain her immediately, but he refuses to do so, saying that their hands are full at the moment, and it's very likely that she's dead anyway. So first off, I do really like this scene. It was really well acted, very emotionally impactful. I must admit to getting a little teary-eyed every time I watch it. Plus the way they had the tears ball up in her eyes, the way it would in Zero G, was very impressive. It was true to the novels, where Anna was described as being blinded by her tears that pulled in her eyes when dealing with the dying poet. But all that being said, I think killing off Tilly was a mistake, and I think she would have added more to the story alive rather than dead. Also, it should be noted that in the novels, Tilly encountered Clarissa after she's apprehended and is instrumental in comforting her, and which really builds towards Clarissa's eventual redemption, which makes a lot more sense in the novels. And plus, I much prefer that encounter to where Clarissa tries to kill her. So I'm going to give this a -2. Then we see Clarissa trying to access the flight plan of the Rocinante and how to get to it, and she seems to be in a rush, so as soon as she has the information, she rushes to leave the ship. While in the med bay, we see Anna go up to a medic and ask about Melba, and the med reports that she left. Anna asks where she went, and the medic reports that she doesn't know, so Anna asks her to track her. But when the medic tries to insist she's too busy, Anna grabs her arm and forcibly insists. Giving into this, the medic gets her tracking details and sends it to Anna's hand terminal and tells her to track her herself. So Anna does so, but is a bit too late as she finds Melba already in a mech suit preparing to leave the ship, and the hatch doors close before Anna can get to her. Anna screams at her through the closed doors, telling her that she can't escape what she's done. All she can do is beg for forgiveness. So in the novels, this all happened quite differently. When Anna and Tilly are in the security office after the officer says they're too busy to apprehend Clarissa, while he's distracted talking to Tilly, Anna grabs a taser from the office and steals it. Once she and Tilly leave, Tilly tells her that she should let the security officers handle Clarissa. Anna reveals that she stole a taser and intends to go after Clarissa herself. As in the novels, it's established that Anna has experience with tasers, although this one is a much tougher quality, as it's a military grade taser. Tilly thinks the idea is stupid, as Anna is still drugged out, but Anna insists that she go after Clarissa. However, by the time she gets to her location, Clarissa has already left the ship, so Anna gets in a spacesuit and goes after her. So it seems out of Anna's book character to yell at Melba the way she did in the show and tell her the only thing she can do is beg for forgiveness, as book Anna was always much more gentle than that. But then again, book Anna didn't just have her best friend brutally killed by her the way show Anna did, so it does make sense. So either way this works, I'm going to give it a 0. So then we go over to the Rocinante, where Naomi arrives and calls out for Holden, Alex, or Amos, but no one responds. She searches all over the ship, first going to the command center where she uses the intercom to call out to them, but no one responds. So she looks in the crew quarters and the corridors and finally comes across Alex in the mess hall, floating unconscious, surrounded by floating food, and his headphones floating nearby while a country music song plays the chorus, "I Gotta Find You." It's so funny how the music Alex listens to seems to be so relevant to the scene that it's in the show, like that time he was listening to "I'm So Lonesome" when he was on the Rocinante alone. Anyway, Naomi goes to Alex to see if he's okay and to shake him awake. Alex is surprised to see her and she asks where Holden and Amos are. Alex says that Holden left the ship a while ago and went with Miller. This, of course, confuses Naomi, but before she can ask more, Alex loses consciousness again. Naomi takes Alex to the med bay and hooks him up to a bed, and then goes looking for Amos, and finds him in the engine room floating. Naomi cries and tells Amos that he has to be okay, and then he opens his eyes and looks at Naomi and simply says, "You changed your hair," and then loses consciousness again. Naomi hugs him, relieved that he's okay. So in the novels, as you can guess, we didn't get a scene like this because Naomi never left the Rocinante. Further, since there are no viewpoint characters on the Rocinante, we never saw what happened to it when the incident occurred. In that way, there was like a mystery of were they okay with Holden, who was wondering what happened to his crew. We didn't learn what happened to Naomi until Clarissa went on board the Rocinante to find her doing repairs, and we didn't learn what happened to Alex and Amos until the following Anna chapter, where while Anna and Naomi were running from Clarissa, Naomi casually mentioned that Alex and Amos were in the med bay recovering from the injuries that they received during the incident. So this is a better way to check up on these important characters while maintaining the same mystery of what happened to them that the novels had. But this scene did drag on for far too long, really stretching the moment much longer than it should have been, so I'm going to give this a +1. So then we go back to the Behemoth, where Ashford and Drummer are still stuck, and Drummer gets mesmerized by all the floating debris and dead bodies, and seems to have come to a conclusion. She then starts ripping the wiring up and getting ready to do something, so Ashford asks her what she is doing, but she ignores him and says that in this crisis the Behemoth can't afford to lose its captain and first officer, that one of them needs to survive. Ashford says there's still hope, and Drummer replies that she's wrong, not all the optimists she knows are dead, and then starts the engines of the farming truck and it moves backwards, crushing her. Simultaneously, Ashford floats free. His first reaction is to call for help to help Drummer. Next, we see a crew of people working to save Drummer, who is still alive, and Ashford orders she be taken to the med bay immediately, seeming grateful for her sacrifice. Grigori then gives him a status report that 100 had died and 100 more are injured. Ashford says they need gravity so they can heal, but Grigori points out that they're stuck and can't go to thrust, so Ashford then suggests that they spin the drum. Grigori points out that it's never been done before and that they're not sure that trying it will not destroy the ship, but Ashford demands that they try. So in the novels, Bull starts coordinating repairs from the med bay, mainly with Sam. When talking to her, he stresses the importance that everyone in the slow zone come together as one in order to deal with the crisis, and he says that as long as they keep squabbling over their petty differences, they won't accomplish anything. So he suggests that everyone come aboard the Behemoth so they can work as one. Sam thinks that's a fantasy idea that could never happen, but Bull said it could happen if they're able to offer them something they can't get anywhere else. When Sam asks what that is, he tells her to spin the drum so that they can offer everyone gravity so that their wounded can heal. So I like the idea of the concept of spinning the drum being done purposely to unite everyone rather than just for a selfish reason of healing their own. Also, it's kind of implied in the scene that Astrid is mainly ordering that they spin the drum to save Drummer in particular. Plus, I really don't think this scene works in the greater context of the story, because here Drummer sacrifices herself so that Astrid can live and thus command, and Astrid seems to appreciate that sacrifice, which does not at all add up for the conflict that these two are about to engage in the next several episodes. It makes this story feel a bit clunky, so I'm going to give this a -5. So then we go to Clarissa Mal floating in space, approaching the Rosinante, and she lands on it with a thud and begins to cut her way inside. We then go inside to Naomi in the engine room working on repairs, and when the alarms go off, that something has penetrated the cargo bay. She goes to investigate and finds the ripped cargo bay door, and then Clarissa plops down behind her wearing the mech suit and starts to attack her. Naomi attacks back, but Clarissa's mech suit is overpowering, so Naomi manages to trick Clarissa into getting one of the mech's magnetic arms stuck on the wall, and she then tries to fly away to safety. But Clarissa manages to unattach herself and uses the mech suit's thrusters to catch up to Naomi and pins her to the ground. She then uses the mech's claw to grab Naomi's neck and strangle her. She demands to know where Holden is, but Naomi says that even if she knew, she wouldn't tell her, and this seems to piss Clarissa off, who prepares to crush her, but then she suddenly gets zapped from behind and falls down limp. And when she does, we see that Anna was the one who zapped her, and she asks Naomi if she's alright. Now, the way it happened in the books was quite similar, except it was much longer and more involved. The fight actually took place in the engine room, as Clarissa went there to try to detonate the ship's engines because she already knew that Holden wasn't there but believed the blast would kill him anyway. But when she arrived in the engine room, Naomi was already there working on repairs, and she attacked her as soon as she saw Clarissa approaching, yelling at her that she doesn't get to hurt her ship. But Clarissa replies that she can't stop her. So the fight continues and is a bit more involved, with a lot more talking between the two characters. At one stage, Clarissa flings Naomi aside and assumes that she's out, so goes to detonate the Rosinate's core, but while she's trying to do that, Naomi had snuck up and ejected the core, thus preventing her from doing that. This angers Clarissa, who figures if she can't kill Holden, the next best thing is to kill his lover, so she puts Naomi in a stranglehold similar to that in the show, but instead of asking where Holden is, she tells Naomi who she really is and why she's killing her, saying that it's Holden's fault for what he did to her family. And then Anna shows up and tasers Clarissa and then goes to help Naomi. However, the taser didn't hit Clarissa but her mech suit, which reboots itself after a little time, and Clarissa goes after them again. So Naomi and Anna escape in the vents and hide behind a closed hatch. And Naomi says they're going to have to kill Clarissa and asks Anna if she's good with that, and Anna says no. So Naomi pulls her gun out and prepares to do it herself, but then her wounds get to her and she loses consciousness. Anna freaks out as Clarissa is in her mech suit, pounds on the hatch, trying to break through. And just when Anna thinks she's finished, she hears the mechanical voice of the mech suit say, "Reserve power depleted," and then hears Clarissa cursing, and then the pounding stops. But apparently, Clarissa takes off the mech suit and pounds with her fist. Anna doesn't know this at the time, but Clarissa is actually using her combat enhancement drugs, trying to break through with her fists, and she does manage to break through the hatch, but by the time she does, her drugs have worn off, and she collapses to the ground vomiting, and Anna easily ties her up and sedates her. So the book's version was not only longer, but much more intense, much more high stakes, much more involved. Plus, it went into more detail about how Anna followed Clarissa to the Rosinante, making that part be much more plausible. So overall, this scene barely scratches the surface of what the books did, so I'm going to give this a -4. We then go to the Behemoth, where Ashford arrives in the command center and Grigori reports they're ready to spin the drum. Ashford then climbs on top of the balcony that overlooks the rest of the command center so he can overlook all the peasants like a king, and then commands they spin the drum. They do so and the ship shakes, but overall it works, and Grigori reports that they have 1/10 G, and everyone cheers. Ashford then orders that they send a message to all the ships in the area. He then introduces himself as the captain of the Behemoth and says they're all victims of the same catastrophe, but his ship is different as they are able to create spin gravity. He then invites everyone to bring their wounded on board so that they may heal. He then tells them that they will be welcomed as Belters embrace all of them. So in the novels, they didn't make such a big deal out of spinning the drum. In fact, if I'm being honest, the first time I read the book, I kind of missed that part. And it happens between chapters. At the end of one chapter, Bull tells Sam to spin the drum, and at the start of the next chapter, the drum has already been spinning for a while. However, Ashford just found out about it and is pissed, so he storms down to Bull's room in the med bay, accompanied by his first officer, Michio Pa, and 2 of Bull's security men, one of them being his deputy, Serge. Ashford is furious as in order to spin the drum, Sam had to take down the rail guns, which essentially disarmed the ship. He is further furious because Bull had invited all the other ship's personnel on board so that their injured could heal. In truth, he ran all of this by Michio Pa before doing it, but he didn't want to throw her under the bus, so he took responsibility for it. Ashford then tells Bull that he's relieved of duty and that he orders the doctor to put him in a medical coma. He further makes it clear that he wants the drum to stop spinning so they can arm the ship again, and he's not going to let any quote-unquote enemy personnel on board. Bull says no, but Ashford replies that it isn't up for debate, to which Bull says, "You're goddamn right it's not." And he then calls him an asshole and says that he's not going to let his ego get everyone killed. He then talks directly to Pa, telling her that she knows he's right and Ashford's ego is going to get them all killed. Ashford yells at Bull, telling him to stop addressing his subordinate, and when Bull ignores him, Ashford gets so frustrated he attacks him. Bull's paralyzed body flies into the air, and some of the tubes attached to him violently hold him down, while others rip apart pieces of his flesh. Pa and Serge hold Ashford back while the doctor puts Bull back on the table and asks politely that her patient with the crushed spinal cord not be attacked. Ashford repeats his order to the doctor to put Bull in a medical coma immediately, so Bull orders Serge to place Ashford under arrest and lock him in his quarters. Ashford is flabbergasted, and some people look to Pa, who finally tells Serge that he heard the security chief's orders, so the security men grab Ashford away screaming, who insists that it's mutiny. Bull thanks Pa for doing the right thing, but she simply tells Bull that they're not friends, but Bull insists that they don't have to be. So, as much as I like this spinning the drum and how exciting that was for the show, the scene in the novels with relieving Ashford of command was amazing and far superior than anything the show did in its place, as the dynamic in the show of Ashford wanting to unite all of the belt, which convinces Drummer to sacrifice herself for him, and then him acknowledging her sacrifice, but then getting all egotistical and calling it his ship, is a bit inconsistent and not very clear cut, where the dynamic of them having to overall overthrow an egotistical politician who doesn't deserve to be captain in order to save everyone's lives was much more clear-cut, and also a hell of a lot more exciting and engaging and just overall better storytelling. So I'm going to give this a -5. So then we go to the Martian Dropship, where Bobby and the Marines are listening to Asher's message, and one of them says that the orders have not changed, that they're to return Holden to the Susan. Trep remarks on how twisted this place is, that the skinnies are saving them, but Draper remarks that they have the right idea, that they all need to work together in order to survive, and then she goes to the back to check on Holden, where Trep and Oshie shake their heads at Draper, obviously disagreeing with her. When Draper gets to the back, she finds Holden is awake and asks him if he's okay. Holden simply says that when he was there, he had a vision, and when Bobby asks him what of, he answers, "The end of everything. Dun dun dun." So in the novels, Holden doesn't give any vague doomsday warnings. Instead, when the CEO goes to interrogate him, Holden says that there's no need to threaten or beat him, that he'll just tell her everything. So he opens up about everything, about Miller, about the station, about the vision he had, plus the notion that he has that the station has destroyed whole solar systems in the past and could do so to their solar system if it thinks they're a big enough threat, and his warning that they need to prove they're not a threat in order to get out of the situation. The Martian simply acknowledges his story but gives no opinion on it whatsoever. Now, first off, the way the other Martian Marines are so obtuse and dumb, and they don't like Bobby, who is clearly the only intelligent and reasonable person there, is a bit annoying. But I did find Holden's doomsday warning actually a lot more effective and chilling than his confession to the Martians, so I'm going to give this a +1. So my final adaptation score for Fallen World is a -29. Now, I do believe this is the lowest score I have ever given an episode yet, but it by no means means that this is my least favorite episode. In fact, I would say that overall, I like this episode. But when you compare it to the novels, it falls way short. I have to believe the novels did this part of the story much, much better, particularly the aspect of the Behemoth, as I loved Bull's story of being paralyzed, whereas spending an entire episode with Drummer and Ashford stuck behind a farming equipment was boring. And they also shortchanged Clarissa and Anna's story a bit, particularly by cutting back on the most exciting moment in the novels. There were still some good moments in the episodes, such as Tilly's death. It was very heart-wrenching, but it just overall failed to live up to the novels, in my opinion. So that's it for my book-to-show comparison for The Expanse Season 3, Episode 11. I'll be back in about a week to finish up my book-to-show comparison coverage of Season 3 with the 2-part finale. So be sure to keep an eye out for that, as well as many more videos on The Expanse and videos on other shows like Star Trek, Lost, and more. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.